I don't know where you want to take today's call. There's so many. You sent a
Just
text with some
keep going.
great,
Yeah.
some great ideas. But so with your course, right? So one of the things that I was thinking about, and I'm really spending a lot of time, if fun time thinking about, and what is that copy for me on that page, right? And thank you for sending those additional documents. They're very, very helpful. And
That's
the
stuff to find topics that people are talking about. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's a little bit more, right? The way you describe it, and I have my notes here. It's when someone comes to your website, right? You got a few seconds, let's just say 3 to 5 seconds, and you're going to say, what's this? What's it for? What service are you providing? And who's it for? Right? Like those are there's so much other that goes into it, right? As you explain in your course, but those two things, right, help you begin to start that process.
Yep.
But and I was Googling a lot, doing a lot of research, and then obviously looking at the documents you sent to help me understand what those, and the shorter is the better, right? Which is that. And one of the things that popped into my mind that I wanted your feedback on is how do we say this? How I found happiness again, how I found joy again. And it was, despite bankruptcy, losing my business, losing millions, frustrations in relationships, frustrations in parenting, frustrations in getting older, my post 40 body versus my my post 20 body, right? All of these things that we now as adults go into, right? And I'm kind of like, I love that approach. It doesn't really address the business side of what I like, but it does sort of, is that what if I was going to ask you one question, forget about what services I am doing, is that what you get out of these Joshua teachings, this ascension course? If I was going to ask you one thing you were going to get out of it, what would it be, that one thing you got out of it?
Happiness.
Yeah. So and that's what I felt too.
Yeah.
I felt
that because all the stuff, as you say, stuff accumulates as you get older. And some of it is because you get older. But a lot of it is, I think you and I realize now that people become more fearful. And excuse me, I'm still got my post-COVID cough going on here. I had a couple of moments in the webinar yesterday. Was like, please keep going, voice, please keep going. Please. So we accumulate stuff, and you can either become more fearful and shrink in, or you can actually take a whole new perspective and start to expand out again. And you and I, well, I don't know about you, but even though I'm an optimist and energetic and all that stuff, high energy person, always on the go and very optimistic, always have been, I think various things happen in my life which kind of got on top of me. But it happens, you see a lot of people of my age, for example, like I'm 64 and a half. So, I'll be 65 in January. And, I got a friend who's 75. I used to do a lot of backcountry hiking with him, and he's amazing. He's quite open and super energetic, but he's not like most people I know of 75. He's far more open-minded. He's quite unusual. I actually met him at a retreat weekend about 20, 30 years ago. It was a men's weekend. So he'd been an accountant and he had a chemistry degree, right? And he'd been in business and did all that stuff, but he decided to look within, so to speak. And so he was exploring that side of life, and he did quite a deep dive on this. So he's unusual, but most people I know become more fearful as they get older. Their world shrinks. And I mean, this is probably heading into a more of a woo-woo discussion than a business discussion, but that's fine, whichever way it goes. Yeah, I'll stop there and I'll think of some more things, but you tell me what you think.
I love it. And I think that's, to be honest, what came to me was right. And we get to that point, and you said it beautifully. It's that fear about losing what we've already gained, what we've collected, right? Versus the enjoyment or the love for what's next, for the potential, the curiosity for what's going to come next. We have so much fear about losing what we've gained or what we've accumulated.
Yeah.
Right. There's no more joy or curiosity of what's next. We think we've struggled and efforted to collect all these things, right? And then we're like, Now that we got them, and now we're in that defensive mode. It's like, how do you get out of that defensive mode and get back into that curiosity mode, right?
Well, you and I took an unusual path to overcome the fear of losing everything, which was to lose everything.
To lose it all.
It's like, I lost it all, and it's not actually that bad. And then to realize that both of us have made and lost and made fortunes again, I realized that, you know, that it's I've done that because I'm adventurous and I explore. It's not so much about risk taking or being reckless. It's that, I mean, things happen that you know, you could say at the basic level are beyond your control. Like in a spiritual sense or a higher level, you might say you attracted or created these circumstances, which is a relatively high kind of way to look at it. But I mean, in your case, you were in a mega business, and your business partner basically stole a lot of money, right? So you know, that's something that was sort of beyond your control. In my case, I ended up within a family situation with my late wife's one of her children decided to take legal action, and you know, that was the beginning of the slippery slope for me, because it cost a fortune to defend. I discovered it's very easy and cheap to attack, like an estate or, you know, a structure. We use trust in the English sense. It's very easy to attack those entities, but it's really expensive to defend them. And eventually you have to have almost like forensic accounting for every shot they fire. You have to actually get accountants to do extensive work. So what was cheap for them to attack was very expensive to defend. But you know, on the other hand, I realize now that I had this strange journey that when I was about 24, I ended up commission selling, and I started making a lot of money very quickly. So this was 1982, 83. And in 83, I started in the middle of 82. And in 83, I made $120,000, which back in 1983 was quite a lot of money. And I remember at the time that, like, I've been at university, I had long hair and a beard, and you know, ever since until last year or the year before, you know, I've been super clean cut, you know, no beard, which I grew recently, and short hair. But, and, you know, I had patch jeans and blah, blah, blah. So, excuse me a second. I knew when I took this job and I started making all this money, I thought, this is fun, I'm going to make more money. And I thought, the person that I was before, I remember thinking specifically at that time that I am putting that person aside. You know, so that was the person who had done a liberal arts degree in like poetry and art and literature and music and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I kept on liking music, but instead of exploring all that sort of stuff, I decided to get into the, you know, dirty world of money. So, and I've adopted that persona for years. And it's only recently that I've reconnected with that truer part of who I am and let go of trying to be something and trying to be somebody. You know, when you're in the money world, like you were a Madison Avenue and all that sort of stuff, and I don't know if you were like this, but I noticed that people who had a lot of money that I started to associate with, they would say things and drop things in a way. They wouldn't be saying I'm wealthy, but from the things they said, you could tell that they made a lot of money. They were trying to make sure everybody knew. And so you would do conspicuous things like fly business class or occasionally first class.
Or what watch you had, right?
Which sell it, but anyway, so I did all that stuff, right? I did all that. And it was very disappointing if you know, bought super expensive socks or a watch, if people didn't notice. It's like, can't you see I'm amazing because I'm wearing, you know, socks that cost 20 times what you paid for socks at Walmart? So, but I discovered that nobody noticed and made any difference. Actually, in Hawaii about 8 years ago, I bought like 20 or 30 pairs of the same black socks at Walmart on the big island of Hawaii. And they're still going. Like occasionally I have to throw one out, but it was like, man, that was the best ever sock purchase of my entire life. So, and my previous self would not have been caught dead. You know, I had all these designer socks made of beautiful, you know, cotton or wool from Italy and all this sort of rubbish. So anyway, I digressed a little, but I went way down there.
No, but it's a mindset. It's important you say that. And I couldn't agree more with you. Like the way you describe that, Rob, is it's a mindset. It's a mental construct, right? And,
Yep.
and I think That's what you and I have, that a lot of that'll, and then we've been able to find a path forward through that, up and through and expand through that, and get out of that, because that's struggle and effort, right? That's all struggle and effort.
Yeah.
And we think when we move from curiosity, because as we take those jobs, when I took the same job, we're 10 years apart. In 1991, 92, I took the commission job. You took it in 81, 82, 83, 90, 93, 94, I started making real money, right? And what we do is, out of curiosity, we move into money, but there's still some joy there, right? We're having fun when we're working.
Yeah.
Like,
I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun, but I had more fun doing that, and I can have more fun doing nothing. When we started doing this work, the teachings of Joshua and all that stuff, teachingsofjoshua.com. When we started doing that and we got to a relatively advanced level, and you realize that outside things don't cause you joy or sorrow, joy or grief, that it's actually your mental construct. And also then getting to a high level about giving up preferences, ideals, and desires. When we started encountering that, I remember talking to Jessica Oati about it, newapproachtolife.com. She and I like, well, if you take all that away, where does the joy come from in life? And I think I talked to you about that as well. So where does the joy in life come from? And then so I got this picture of, all I could think of was 3 possible role models who seemed to be inherently in bliss and joy, regardless of circumstance. And those were Buddha, Jesus, and the Dalai Lama, right? So in other words, who were some higher level beings who could give me an example of a life that maybe was based on pure joy and bliss, the inherent bliss of just being. And so I think that's, without sounding too highfalutin, that's where we're getting to now, that we realize that it's not the external things, even the people in our life, that give us joy. Like the joy, the joy you feel around seeing your children, for example, is around you and your inner self have a moment of deep agreement, which is that I have a strong bond with this wonderful person, and I feel amazing because we are both channeling source energy or love. So we think it's that person, and it kind of is, but really it's the closeness to that person and the history of that person over many lifetimes, including this one. It's the closeness to that person that enables us for a moment to have that pure bliss of channeling love from source or source energy. And we realize it kind of is that person, but not really. It's the fact that when you're with them, because you're so close and there's such a bond of trust and history and all the rest of it, that you can kind of forget everything else and have that moment of pure joy. So to me, that's kind of like, okay, that's a pinnacle moment. How do I recreate that moment in other parts of my life and with other people? I just want to say about the vibration thing, when I said about, we'll go down the woo-woo path today more than the business path, that Joshua teachings had this concept around your vibration, and that when you're born, all this, but when you're born, you match the vibration of the planet and the place at the time you were born. But the vibration of the planet keeps rising. So when you have kids, the kids have a higher vibration because they came in, several decades later to a planet with a higher vibration. And a trivial example of seeing that in action would be seeing the youngest people in my broader family group, like the really young kids, their adeptness with a cell phone or an iPad versus my mother, who's 92, who knows how to turn her phone on. She's got the old style phone. She doesn't have a smartphone, and she refuses to use an iPad, even though we could do video calls. But she hasn't managed to keep up with the vibration of the planet that created these amazing devices. But 1 and 2-year-old children do. So if in theory, if you could keep raising your vibration, you and I, from the day we were born till now, then we could be at the same level of vibration as a newborn. But we have resistance to many, many, many things. And so it's kind of like if we were having a running race, that we just continue to weigh ourselves down and have obstacles in the way. So what happens is that this resistance means that we are not managing to raise our vibration constantly. But I would like to think, with the work we've done in the last few years, that we've kind of taken, the lid off that jar again, and we got some more essence to vibration happening again. So I'd like to think we're raising our vibration again. I'm not expecting to catch up, with the newborn or the planet right now, because that would be probably miraculous. So who knows? But the point is that you kind of, it's almost metaphorical, but you actually can see it, that because kids come in with different expectations and values, and they don't necessarily have a lot of the fears, and even that whole sort of effort and struggle thing. Like, some people might say that your kids are spoiled or, whatever, indulged, but you could also say, well, the world is actually different for them and they're exploring it in their own way. And like millennials have a completely different approach to work than our generation. And this, your kids are in a new generation after that. And some of them, sometimes they make the millennials look old, which is quite funny because the millennials still think they're it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, and I was just talking we were on the Ascension Experience. We're in the Freedom course, which is course number 12 on the teachingsofjoshua.com, which is a 4-week course anybody can sign up for and anybody can pay for it, which has these weekly touch base calls. And Gary Bodley ran, because Jessica is traveling, so Gary Bodley ran this call. And one of the things we were talking about was this idea of, and you just said it so beautifully, right? This challenge of happiness, right? Where we've spent so much time defining it based upon dollars, meaning that if I have enough money, I'll be able to do these things which will make me happy, right? But as kids, as you say, I'm happy playing in mud. I'm happy playing in a box. Like, I'm just happy. So the idea of happiness changes as we get older.
Yeah.
And
yes.
Right?
Yes. That is a really key point you make. So let's explore that, unpack that a little. So here you are at 5 or 3 or something, right? And you're playing with whatever you're playing with,
a box.
Box. Yeah, it could be a box. I had a picture of my friend down the road, 2 houses down the road, when I was like really young, and his father was a builder and they had the best sandpit in the neighborhood. And so, we had our little cars and diggers and everything in the sandpit. And we spent hours in that sandpit in pure joy. But so what happened between, 3 years old in the sandpit and now? Like, why don't we enjoy playing in the sandpit? And how do we not have that unabashed pure joy with no limits and, no, because if you and I sat in a sandpit, we'd have all these things that will go through our head. Like, what on earth am I doing sitting here in the sandpit? Like, that's what kids do. But kids just let their imagination go, and they don't have all those filters or resistance that we do. Like, I wonder if we could sit in a state of no resistance and recapture that sandpit or box, on the floor moment. Like, what happens to lose that?
Yeah, I would ask you this, because I think you've told me this, right? With your step grandkids, you've actually had those moments where you've been able to go back, right? And even though they're a little bit older, but have those conversations and have those moments that as your old self, you might have been like, this is a silly conversation to have or a waste of my time, that you've actually had that conversation and enjoyed it. You've been like, wow, this is great, right? Like, you're like, well, why can't I have this joy that I just had with my step grandson, and then like either a conversation or whatever it may be. And I think you were talking one time about just taking them to a lake, right?
That's right. Like, I took them up. We went to this resort town called Rotorua or Rotorua. Roto is a lake. It's a lake town. And so we did all the expensive stuff, right? There's a gondola, that goes up the hill, and spend a lot of money on all those sorts of things. And they're quite young at the time, quite young. And they were unimpressed. And I think you ungrateful little so-and-sos. And then we went to this remote lake. There's a lot of lakes around that area, in the middle of a forest, a beautiful native forest. And there was very fine shingle, and they started throwing a bit of shingle on the water, and it made this pattern as it landed. And so they got into it, and it was like, it wasn't the best pattern. It was just like, they were fascinated. And I stood there and I thought, oh, this is free entertainment. Who's got the problem? It's not them, it's me. Because I spent money, you should be enjoying it and you should be grateful. But in fact, so the next morning, I've been doing a lot of men's work at the time, where I was talking about my 75-year-old friend. This was back in the mid-90s. I've been doing a lot of men's work around archetypes and kings and warriors and magicians and all that sort of stuff. And there was this Californian redwood forest in this area, which has become famous for walking tracks and mountain biking. And so these are, how big those trees get, right? So there's this giant redwood forest. So I got this idea. It came to me. I now know this is an inspiration. I thought, we'll get into that whole mythological archetype thing, and I'll take these boys. And I said, let's go to the redwood forest at dawn. And so it must have been winter, because And because it's thermal, you often get steam rising, in strange places just coming out of the ground. So we went to the redwood forest at dawn, which is always a power time anyway. And the steam was rising, from little thermal vents here and there, just because they happen randomly around that area. It's kind of like a mini Yellowstone areas, mud pools and geysers or geysers and all that stuff. Body mud pools, it's amazing. But anyway, and they really got into it. And so I kind of suggested a little bit, about demons and dragons and warriors and kings, and so they picked up sticks and they were slaying imaginary dragons, and they really got into it. And they would have been like 4 and 6 maybe at the time, these guys, and they mentioned this recently again. Like it's etched in their memory.
See, at some point, and this is what I would love to define with you. At some point, through our education, through our society, through media, the idea that fun or happiness is free is replaced with you need to purchase your happiness. If you don't have money, poor families can't be happy. You can't be happy if you're poor. You can't be happy if you don't make this kind of money, right? So it's there's this exchange that goes on. When as a kid, you're not ready to understand what money does or how it found. So fun is whatever the universe has in front of you, whatever you're seeing. You took them to a lake, they had a great time. Took them to the forest, it's whatever the universe gave. They were like, this is awesome. Even though each experience was completely different.
Yeah.
Right. And then you and I started to get into commission sales, and we went from college, from university, which was just great. And whatever money I had in my pocket, I earned, right. And was paying for college and whatever. It was cool. I never thought to save or have more. Right. But then we went and did commission sales, and I was like, wow, I'm making money. Now I can really have some fun. Then all of a sudden I spent all the time making money. Then it wasn't so fun. And then I started collecting stuff. And then I was afraid of losing stuff. Then I lost all my stuff. Then I was depressed that I lost all the stuff that I had gotten.
So that's,
and I'm like, no, this is happening.
At college, at university, when I was 18, 19, 20, I never had any thoughts about accumulating money, right? Like I received money from various sources, and I ended up cleaning in an office tower. And the first cleaning job was like 21-story office tower. And my job was to clean the men's toilets and the women's toilets. So down one side and down the other. 21.
Tony Robbins. You're Tony Robbins. That was his first job.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm not kidding you. That was his first job too.
The CEO had his entire bathroom behind his office, which was interesting. I cleaned the CEO's crapper as well. So So anyway, but at that time I had no thought about money or net worth or that I had
why
no
were you
about
working?
Any of that.
So then, here's a great question. Why were you working back then? Like, what was the purpose of you having a job?
Oh, because I wanted to buy a motorbike, which I did. Because my friends had cleaning jobs and other jobs as well, my university friends, and they all had motorbikes. So I thought I'll get a job and buy a motorbike, which I did. But also, my family wasn't poor, but they, weren't going to give me hundreds of dollars a week to live on. They probably could not have afforded that. I'd won it was called a bursary, a public exam where you get a relatively small amount of money, but I got the only A bursary in our school. I graduated top of the school. And so I got some money every term, like three terms, I think there were a year. So beginning of every term, you get some money, which was a few $100s, but that went a long way back then, a very long way. And so I had a bursary and I worked, and I initially was living at home. So I guess, no rent and like food and board were free. So I was working because it would give me more money for beer and motorbike.
That's why I worked. So I worked when I was in college as well. I worked for a motorbike, but literally every dollar I had went to an experience. And if it was drinking, right, I went to beer, or maybe I backpacked through Europe when I was a junior. A bunch of us just got on a plane. We had no place to stay. I was literally sleeping on park benches. You could do that back in,
Wow.
It was like 1990, I did this.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can do that. I mean, I remember getting, in London, in England, getting pushed by the police. You can't sleep here. And I'm like, what time is it? They're like, well, whatever time it was, 5. I'm like, oh, yep, got to get up anyway. It's like, you were in here. So the interesting part is, when did we?
Yeah. After that university time, right? So maybe it was first job or sometime during that first job phase. So I worked for 3 years for a large corporate. trying various jobs, and I learned quite a lot that was interesting, but I knew it wasn't me. So I did 3 years as a large corporate, and I still didn't, at that stage where I must have been 23, 24, I still didn't have that thing about the need to buy a house or accumulate net worth or a 401k or whatever you call it. Is that what you call your retirement funds? 401k or something?
Yes. I don't know. Mine are in, as my wife and I just joked, mine are in crypto, and currently they're not in a good place.
I know. I didn't put a lot of money into crypto, and the small amount I put in is not in a good place either. So anyway, so it wasn't in that first job. And then I met my first wife, and we went and took a job out in the countryside in this homestead for like from, I don't know, November through till April. And so we there was this big old homestead, which this artist had a long-term lease on. So we did the cooking and the cleaning and all that stuff in this big homestead. I did the lawns and pruned the roses and all that. So we did that, and then we moved to Auckland, and then I got this commission selling job. And I guess it started then then people were all talking about getting a house and having money and having nice cars. So
okay, so that's the key right there. So it's not about working. So working didn't let's just say pervert our happiness. It was the idea of what we needed to accumulate that perverted our happiness.
Yeah, I think it does happen in the workplace anyway, and I guess it's a conditioning. Yeah. Everyone else is like that. I read an article written, an opinion piece written by a 25-year-old journalist who was moving from New Zealand to Sydney, Australia, because she can earn a whole lot more. So, and it was interesting because she was talking about wanting to get a house and all that kind of stuff. So, and she said that when she was at school and told the teacher she wanted to be a journalist, the teacher said, "There's no money in journalism." And she said, I naively said something like, well, money's not that important or the most important thing in life. So when she was at school, like 17 or something, she wanted to be a journalist. That was her passion. And she disregarded the teacher's comment that there's no money in journalism. But she now realizes at 25 that the money is really important. And she's moved to Sydney because Australia has a higher GDP per capita than New Zealand, with all the mining riches and everything else. It's got a high standard of living, very high standard of living. And so New Zealand's not at that level. It's different economies, whatever. Anyway, so she can make a lot more money and have a lot better lifestyle. She can get an apartment in a better part of the city, close to, lots of cool places to hang out. So that was interesting that she's doing it for lifestyle. But I realized she's got to 25 and somehow she's absorbed the need that she didn't have at 17, that she does need to make as much money as she can, and she wants to get a house now.
So maybe it's and I'm just trying to in my own mind work this out. So maybe it's the idea that when you're younger, experiences equal lifestyle, and that the older you get, it's things
security
that equal your life, that equal lifestyle.
Security, yeah. Some of it's because you're no longer under your parents' umbrella, right? You move out of your parents' umbrella, they provide the security, and then you go out.
Well, I'm not so much about security, because most people don't have 2 months worth of savings, 2 months worth of bills savings.
Yeah,
I think Americans
worries
have,
most people too.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you look,
they might own a house. It's just that they're only one or two paychecks away from not being able to pay their mortgage, right?
Yeah, 100%. Right. So the idea that experiences equal your lifestyle, right, when you're younger, and then that it's the security, right? You said security or things, or it's something else that equals your lifestyle. Once you make that transition, right? Once you go from, I want you to see my watch, I want you to see my socks, I want you to see, once you make that transition in your mind, your mental constructs change from, I'm just having fun going to the beach. Well, what beach? What resort did you stay at? Right? You're like, yes. I don't know. My feet are in the same ocean. Like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? It's like the ocean's the ocean, right? There's that. And I think as an adult, we make that mental construct, and then we just go down that rabbit hole because as a kid, you can always have a new experience. Your curiosity can bring you anything and everything. So there's never an end to it. There's never an end to anything with that. Once you switch that to secure, let's just call it security and things that equal your lifestyle, there is an end, because money can only buy so much, and you can only make so much money, right? I mean, people make different amounts of money. So everybody's So while you're young, everybody's experiences are the same. If my parents are worth $100 million, but they're not letting me buy a new Lamborghini, and I want that Lamborghini, I'm still not getting it. Even though my parents make $50,000 and I'm not getting a car when I turn 16, I'm still not getting the car. If the kid who's making $100 million, parents making $100 million, if they don't get the Lamborghini, they still didn't get the car. They're not going to be happy with anything else. So they're still experiencing from a physical standpoint that emotion of lack, of unhappiness, right? We're just choosing the circumstances around which we feel that same exact experience. Although society tells us they're different experiences, because the poor person will say, "Oh my God, you can get any car you want. You know, you have," and you're like, and you disregard their feelings. And the same thing with the rich people, with the poor people. "Oh, you don't have my problems. You could do whatever you want. You have more freedom," and everybody disregards each other's circumstances.
Yeah.
Right. And then, and then everything sort of gets blended. So, and I love this conversation. It's really bringing some things home for me. So my question is, how do you describe that in a one-liner, right? That is, really, because this is what I want to help people with. And
right.
And as much as I was Googling, you're the only person that understands what I'm talking about.
Yes. Yeah.
And I got to be able to reach
about
more
it as
people.
a midlife crisis, and midlife crisis is the thing, and that kind of encapsulates, the syndrome that you're talking about, and people can relate to that. And whatever we call it, or whatever you describe it as, I mean, it has to have relatable elements in it so people can look at it and say, "That's me." I just want to say, when you're talking about signals about money, something I noticed about myself is, in the 5 years before COVID, we were living overseas and digital nomads, and we had an apartment in Mumbai, India. We lived mostly in India.
I must say, by the way, I love that whole comment, digital nomads. It's like, there's so much, like, I have aspiration to be that.
Yeah. So a lot of people do. So Trace and I are making a little mini thing for the course that we're doing, our big new course, where to tell people what we did, how we did it, how we became paperless, and how we actually managed to cut all those ties and become digital nomads for 5 years. So we lived mostly in India. You got to leave periodically and get you a visa and go back. And we all spent a lot of time in France as well. We spent an entire summer there and more time as well. But to a lot of well-to-do people, France is up there with the destinations. It's the most popular tourist destination in the world, and it's kind of a luxury destination for a lot of people. So it's got more show-off value, So Skype value, Skype. No, you guys don't use that word. Show-off value. It's an Australian, New Zealand word to talk big, show off. Anyway, so I would be going back a few years. I would say we've been living in France and India, whereas now I noticed I'm saying, because we spent much more time in India than France, and it was more, in a way, more shaping of thinking. I focus on the India more. I say we spent most of the time in India, and we lived in France as well. So I've noticed that my language has changed. Trace was always saying, "Oh, we lived in India and France," whereas I was saying France and India, because France sounded better, I thought. I can hear can you hear the siren in the background?
I can. What is that?
Oh, this is a small village. And so rural towns in New Zealand have the fire department, the fire brigade, we call it, as volunteers. So there'll be a local builder and a local someone else, the siren goes off, their pager goes off, and it's calling all that. So there's either a fire or a car accident where they're the first responders. So it's froze last night, and somebody's probably hit an ice patch on the hill and driven off the hill. So it could be a fire, but it's mostly an accident that they've gone to. So this is to get all the boys off the hammers and the drills and into their cars and into the fire truck, and to go and do what they do. So why they have the siren?
That's awesome.
They got a pager, I don't know, but it's a volunteer fire brigade system around all of New Zealand, because small population over widely dispersed, and so all small towns have volunteer fire brigades here.
I love that, by the way. That's great.
So the siren's just down the hill here. Sometimes it's also what we call the rescue helicopter. It's an hour and a half to the city, over the hill, and down the other side. So if somebody gets ill, and there's a lot of old people here, then the helicopter comes in and takes them to hospital. And so those guys also prepare the helicopter landing place on the sports field, the local sports field, the football field becomes the helicopter landing pad, and those guys keep everybody away and set up the landing place. So that's what that noise is. It's one of those three things: car accident, helicopter, or a fire.
I love it. I love it. But there is something, right? You know, it's the more we flush this out and we unpack this, to me, it's there's something here, right? Where we do at that, let's just say the midlife crisis, which is the awakening that all the things I collected aren't making me happy. That's what a midlife crisis is. Right? Everybody, you know, handles it differently. Go out and buy that's why people went out and bought a sports car, because they wanted when they were a kid, or they go out and they have an affair, right? Because that's what they were doing when they were in high school, right? Every action that someone takes in a quote unquote midlife crisis moment is to somehow regain the feelings they had in childhood.
Yes, and it doesn't work, right?
No, because
or even the feelings they had, you know, as an 18 or 20-year-old at university, and it doesn't work. You can't recapture that. I've noticed that trying to recapture feelings of events doesn't work, but it's because the energy and the vibration change, right? There was a restaurant that Trace and I went to, it was maybe the second night that we knew each other. And it was a magical, absolutely, it was a beautiful summer's evening. It was just a magical night. And we've gone back there once or twice and we've never recaptured that moment. And I was thinking, why can't we recapture that moment? But it's because everything has changed, right? It was the intense energy of the first meeting. And then I thought, that's ridiculous. It's got nothing to do with that restaurant. It was the feeling between us. The restaurant doesn't have that energy or that feeling. That was to do with us. We brought that to, it's the same, you know, quite nice but ordinary restaurant then and now. Whereas I think, oh, it's not like it used to be. So anyway, that's a trivial example of the thing. So
it's a great example, but it's perfect, right? Because we've all had that. Every one of us has had that experience. It's like, it's nuts on, right? That's great. You know, it could be a ball field, could be whatever it is, right? We think, you know, we can't go back home again. I mean, there's songs written about this, right? Because it's true, because the energy and the experience that we were having back then isn't where we are now. Gary said that in the Joshua Live, I think last week, right? In 2 weeks from now, we're all going to have new experiences that have never happened, and we're going to expand the universe in new ways that no one in the world has ever had before. Right? We're not going backwards. Like, no one's going back. We're all expanding forward, either in fear or in love. I mean, that's just it, right? So we try to go backwards in fear because we're not happy where we are. We want to experience what we want to experience, but we can help people and see that choice. And that's really what I want to do. I want to help people see the choice where, and this is the incorrect way, or I say this, I don't think this is the most effective way to say it, but this is what I'm trying to communicate, where you're going to let go of your victimhood, right? And it's almost like your experiences when you're a kid go from experiences equal your lifestyle, equal your joy, to when you get older, where your security and your things equal your lifestyle and create your victimhood. It's almost like this linear experience and it's so interesting to me.
It's, you know, we talk about front door needs and back door needs in our course, and a front door need is something that people can relate to, and a back door need is something that, you know, is part of their real issue or challenge or problem, but there's not something that they would respond to in ad copy, right? So the ad copy has to be the front door need, and then the process introduces them to the back door issue as well. But so if you think about it, you got to think about what are the things about the pain points of this loss of happiness and identify the experience the person is having. So what you're offering is to show people a path to true joy and happiness at any age and stage of life. So it doesn't matter if you're in your 50s or 60s.
Hold on a second. That's
70s.
True path to joy and happiness.
True joy and
That's
true
really
happiness, good. Right? And so in our minds, we've got this model of, you know, the Dalai Lama, Jesus, or Buddha, who, you know, are in a state of bliss, right?
Yep.
So, you know, because Jesus is quite a good example, you know, because everybody knows he had no possessions and he walked around in robes and didn't have much more than, you know, robes that he was in. Like, there's no stories about the Jesus house or, you know, apart from the Last Supper, the Jesus banquet. I don't know where he got the money from for all of that. Miracles, I suppose, come easy. If you can make food and wine, that's pretty cool. So anyway, so he's a good example because there's no concept of Jesus having any possessions, but he's as a luminary spiritual figure, you can see that this person, this entity had inherent joy or bliss and love, love for everything and everybody and no judgment. So that's the picture you have in your mind, is how does one get to that? You and I know that it's not about the possessions, even though your potential clients initially think that it is. They define themselves by their possessions. So it's about, first of all, maybe saying to people, how do you find true and lasting joy and happiness in your life every day, all day for the rest of your life? But you would need to describe the pain points they are experiencing and can relate to in order to attract that person as a client of one kind or another. So, things that you would experiment with it and find out with Facebook ads, you can do ad A and ad B and see which, copy people relate to, and so like split testing. So you might explore, do you find that your happiness and joy and sense of fun diminishes, as the years go by? Do you have as much fun as you did when you were a teenager, that sort of thing? And, do you find that there was the title of a book, and I think it was written by Rabbi Harold Kushner, which was When Everything You Always Wanted Isn't Enough. So when you got everything you thought you wanted and then you find you're not happy.
Love that. You've mentioned that a few times.
I have, yes. And somebody talked about it. Maybe I heard him speak at a conference in the 1980s in the States. So I haven't, that's all I know about that book, right? I have no idea if I ever read it. I think I might have heard him speak. But the name of that stuck in my mind. So that would have been in the 1980s. Yeah, it was at a conference in the 80s. So it's an old book, but the concept was there 40 years ago.
For me, it's like, I think we've always discussed it, right? And it's always been a discussion, I think, around just never, the way you and I are discussing it now is direct, right? But it took years of work, right, to get to this, to be able to have this conversation. And I think what we're looking for now, and I think what we've been unpacking today is, what is that? How do you jump somebody ahead, right? To be able to say, wow, okay, that's interesting. I'd like to learn more about that.
Yeah. So I think it's about, you've got to hit the pain points, right? So
yeah, I wrote that. I like that.
So you got to find people's pain points. Like, what are the pain points they are experiencing that they would prefer not to experience? So it's not about.
So that would be something like, is it always like financial worries? Does it mean that we go directly? Are the pain points the adult pain points versus the child pain points?
Is that the big pain points they're feeling now as an adult in their, whatever age they are, 40s, 50s, 60s? It's the pain points they're feeling now. Yeah. So
it's going to be, so it's completely different. And that's interesting that now we're discussing another interesting point. The pain points of your youth are so much different than the pain points of an adult. So does the pain points that you're experiencing actually drive how you embrace happiness? I guess they do. It's all hand in hand.
So
yes.
I don't know what those words are. It does require some research and exploration, and you can do some Googling and use all those free tools and tactics that I shared with you in those downloads yesterday. So
I loved it.
Yeah. And I mean, I would, I know it sounds corny, but I would probably Google midlife crisis and read what people say about it. And you'll probably find that this psychology, psychologists' interpretations of it, and you'll need to sift through to find about the things that people imagine bring them happiness, but ultimately they find they don't. This
goes back to what we said about, right? It's like the adult security and things, right? I mean, versus the kids. I mean, you said it beautifully too. It's like, took your grandkids to 2 different locations. 3 different locations. One, you spent a boatload of money. They were unhappy. One, you gave them a rock and a lake. And the other, you gave them a stick and a tree. It's just like, holy cow.
Yeah. So this village we live in.
What are their, see, that's the other thing. What are their pain points? So their pain points, think about this for a second, which is super interesting. If you just talk about this, unpack this, So their pain point, when you were doing what I would think would be fun, spending money on all these incredible experiences, that was their pain point. I'm bored. This is not what I want to do. So the pain points shift. That's super interesting. I got to do more research and dig into that.
Right. Well, you see, those boys are in their 30s now, and they have a child each. And I would say their biggest pain point now is breadwinner angst.
Yeah. Wow. You and I both know that too well.
Too well. Yeah. Yeah. And the feeling that one has to be a good provider, especially, with you having, educating children, older teens, so even though your wife is super capable and, has a great job and earns good money, you, as I would as well, feel responsible for being the breadwinner and in charge of all that stuff, which is pretty old school in a way, but that's still, that's how we were brought up. And we are letting that go, but it's very hard to let that go as a man, that whole breadwinner thing, isn't it?
It is. It's about responsibility, right? It's about what you were taught about how you add to society, about your role as a human being. So we were taught this whole false illusion, right? That for us to be meaningful as a human, as a man, these are the things we have to do. Otherwise, we're not meaningful and we're not worthy, right? So that's beaten into us for how long? Yeah. Which is why, I have a lot of friends of, that are men that are, gay and they struggle with their, right, with their ability to fit in, or their worthiness as kids, because they don't feel they're ever going to live up to it. I've talked to a lot of people and I'm like, dude, I'm straight. I have the same feelings you have. It's nothing to do with what your preference is. This has to do with a mental construct, right? We've had some really in-depth conversations and we realized that we were all taught as kids, no matter what we were looking at, that if we didn't fulfill this role, we would not be successful, we would not be respected, and we would not be valued.
Yeah. So breadwinner angst, that you might talk to a client about that, but it's not, I don't think it's front door needs. That's more, no, it's next level down, right? It's something that they can relate to once you've got some rapport and
but
trust.
It's still really important to unpack. And what we're doing is unpacking this concept, because what we started with, right? It's still really valuable. The pain, the thing that when you brought up pain points, how interesting it is. The pain points of childhood and the pain points of adult are the polar opposites. Like they've switched. So as a kid, you want to be sitting in mud, not at a restaurant and a dinner. As adult, you want to be sitting at a restaurant and dinner, not in mud. Like they literally
That is so true. Right? That is so true, because you take kids to a restaurant and they're bored and they run around like, where's the food? I've eaten. Let's go. Let's go play.
Oh, worse. The worst is you're showing them all kinds of food and you're like, I just want French fries and ketchup.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's crazy. It's like, where's the food? Because it's not McDonald's, it didn't come instantly.
So great little story on that, because I grew up in New York City. Our kids grew up, and there's this great Italian restaurant, which I literally would go 3 times a week. And it's been around forever. The Sardi's restaurant, New York City, 76th and 2nd Avenue. Marlo Sardi owns it. It's like 3 or 4 of them, but he's very Italian. They make their own wine in Italy and Tuscany. And my kids, we would just go there, and I grew up, pasta and food and great food. During truffle season, we would go and get risotto as an appetizer and get truffles on it.
Wow. Yeah.
And my kids literally,
I love it.
Oh my God. I'm going to send you a video. I go back, and I've gone to back New York a few times. I always go there and I take videos of the owner, Mauro. He's now, I don't know, he's in his 60s or early 70s. And he comes over because he got the jar with the one truffle in it that he got from, somewhere in France, right? And because that's really where the true truffles come from. That costs like $7,000. That every time he swipes it, right, it's like $100, right? Whatever it is. And I remember my kids going, more, and he would laugh. He's like, your mama and your daddy, they don't want them more. You just want them more. And we would have this conversation. But my kids, because of where we grew up, really began to embrace sitting at that restaurant,
right,
when they could influence what they were getting. So they would get, like, they would ask, Daddy, what is that thing with this, Dad, with that? They wouldn't know but they had this experience. I want to experience that again, Dad. So food for them, and because I'm Italian, because that's how I am, food became an experience. And once food became an experience for us,
Right.
we would go to restaurants and our kids would be like, why are your kids so well behaved? And I'm like, they're not, I'm like, we don't do anything, but they would order whatever they wanted from, and I would say, tell the waiter what you're looking for. Say anything. And to this day, both my kids love going to restaurants, and they will tell the waiter, it's not on the menu, but can you? And so going to a restaurant isn't eating, it's an experience for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's good. That is really good. And at some point in your life, like I've been through it as well, it becomes a name dropping thing, to tell you about some of the 1, 2, and 3-star Michelin star restaurants I've been to in France. That became a bit of a thing for a while. Whereas now,
that's a big deal. If you're doing that, that's
I did all of that. That's wonderful, and it is pretty special. I really got into that for a while. But with Trace, it's like she does love good food, but she would say, "Hey, look, it's a meal. At the end of the day, it's not going to change your life." So, and she's right. And so I have a completely different view about it now. And we don't go out to dinner as often, but I really appreciate it when I do. And also, I'm really not attached to the quality of the service or anything else. Like if something goes wrong, which happens sometimes, it's like, well, that was interesting. Who cares? Like I didn't go there to change my life, right? So you got to think about, why did I go to a restaurant or what I want from it? Which it might sound trivial, but I think it really relates to what you're trying to unpack here, because people do use those things, activities, flying to which country, where did you stay, what part of France did you go to? If it's a part they haven't heard of, then it's like, oh, okay. If it was Provence, it's like, oh, you've been to Provence. But, we have a friend who lives in the northern Ardèche, and that's not cool at all, but it's an amazing little village. And you can see Mont Blanc in the far distance by the church in the yard. There's, the square.
I love that.
And where we're going to France shortly is in the southwest, the Bordeaux kind of region there.
So it's so funny. You just sparked that. And I don't mean to interrupt, but you just said something that was so powerful to me. And I just realized what my wife and we've been going to restaurants lately, and I've been sitting at the bar. And I just realized till you said it, I'm looking to change my experience of what it is to eating. Like I don't care where I'm like, and I want to talk to the bartender, and the bartender's making drinks for all the people in the restaurant. And I just realized we went last Friday, we went to this local restaurant, and they were she was making a slow gin fizz. Have you ever seen a slow gin fizz made?
No.
I had never seen one made. It takes 25 minutes.
You're kidding.
The way she was explaining it. It's got the egg whites, it's got all these different things. It's got to go in a shaker, it's got to go in the refrigerator, it's got to go on these different things. And I was watching her make this, and I'm like, what is? And she said I think she said a slow gin fizz. But my wife and I were eating, we were talking with the bartender, people came over. Our whole dining experience was we were like kids. What is that?
Yes.
Can I taste that? Right? Does it taste good? Like we were kids, and we had a great time. And by the way, we were like, oh my God, that food took like 2 hours to get to it. We didn't even notice.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is really good. This is really good, because you get back to that unattached, right? It's no attachment to anything. Nothing means anything. You're there for the pure fun and joy of it, right? If you attach meaning to the quality of the service, but we do some Facebook ads for a 5-star hotel. It's an international chain. And so one of the hotels here, we do some ads for them. And because we do the ads, we see all the messages coming in on Facebook. And I see these people, and it's just exactly doing it the opposite of what you just said. They attach so much meaning to it. And, they want to complain about the smallest thing, right? Like they advertise that they have limited parking. A guy arrived one day and there was no valet parking, but he had some people with him he was trying to impress. And he was crestfallen and angry because he wanted to front up and show, I'm so important and amazing. And I have this man in a top hat and a coat or whatever, opening the door and valet parking for me. It's like, thank you. And, breeze in like you're royalty or, a star or something. And they said, sorry, the valet parking is full, which is a known thing, with that hotel, because it's in the middle of the city. There's only so much, right? So, and then the outrage, and it stuck in my mind. I see this all the time, and they're all these people attach so much meaning to this experience. And so, and you can see, oh, you spent all that money, you attached all the meaning to the wrong thing, and you didn't enjoy yourself. You let the entire experience be derailed by one thing you thought was wrong. And you're so attached to it that it means something about you or to you. So if unpacking that a little bit, it's that syndrome, right? And some of these people aren't all that old, right? They seem to be in their 30s and 40s. So that's been very interesting to me. I don't like to see that thread because it's like, oh, God, was I ever that bad and shallow
It's
and
interesting,
meaningless rubbish?
It's interesting how everything you described too. It's the money that it's the expectations that money, right, creates versus the expectation of the experience, of the curiosity of the experience.
Yes.
So as kids, right, we love the expectation as a curiosity of the experience. As adults, it's limited, and that's why Gary keeps saying it's limited. Gary Bodley from the teachings of Joshua.com. Our experience becomes so limited because it's based on money.
Yes.
Which is such a small fraction of the actual experience.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, I like that.
Yeah. So the source of true joy is realizing that it doesn't come from external things, and especially not from material things. And once you understand that those things can't make you feel anything, it's you choosing your thoughts about them, and your thoughts create your emotions once you've chosen your thought about a thing. And once you realize that, it's, I guess, the connection to source consciousness, which is really my point about Buddha or Jesus, that they were connected to whatever you want to call it, source consciousness or God, or, in Jesus' case, God the Father, whatever it might be. So they were connected to a source of pure energy or pure love. And so therefore they couldn't ever be in anything but a state of joy and bliss. And, the Bible stuff is sort of a bit cliche sometimes, but, when there's a thing, maybe when early in the crucifixion stage or sometime during Jesus's crucifixion process, there's a thing in the Bible which says something like, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So even when Jesus is getting, tortured and killed, it's like Father being, the essence of God, whatever you want to call that. Like they don't know what they're doing. They don't realize what they're doing. And so like, he's not hating them or trying to fight them. Like he's going with the process, and it's like, they don't realize what they're doing. So, that's kind of a fairly high level statement. I don't know if you and I would be that cool, calm and collected in the midst of being crucified to death, So that's kind of to me, some of those things, from the Bible, some of those quotes like, let he who is without sin cast the first stone, and judge not lest you be judged. So Wayne Dyer used to say, using a Christian analogy, you won't be punished for your anger, you'll be punished by your anger. In other words, if you have anger within you, life is going to be rubbish. So you're going to feel terrible. So just being in that state is just horrible. So so it's a matter of finding the pain points as you get to your 40s and 50s or whatever, and how that's experienced. So it's about the lack of, we are zeroing in slowly on this, I think, circling in, even though we've danced around the peripherals. So it's somehow you lose the essence of the joy of life, right? When, everything you're doing and everything you've got is not truly satisfying. So it's about happiness, fun, satisfaction, meaning. So, it's trying to find what are those keywords or concepts that people can relate to. And so, doing the research using the tools we talked about and tactics, so you can actually find out, what people are saying and thinking about it. And then you would probably just, like, for $1 a day, you can do Facebook ads, and you can actually see which, you make an ad that is identical in every way, apart from, say, the first line of copy, the first headline. And you just trial, you can do 5 or 10 at the same time, and you can actually trial them and see, there are ways to do a really, Facebook have an A/B test, but I find that just making 3 or 4 variations to the same audience kind of does the same thing. So you can, try them and see for $1 a day, which one gets the most clicks. And
I love that.
All you need to do is offer people a download to say, here are our top 5, whatever, make it sound more meaningful. Those top 5 tips to bring true joy, satisfaction, happiness into your life every day. And you and I could, you or I or both of us could write that in no time at all. we could dream that up here and now if we had to, but we're, probably need to call it to a halt shortly. So you can give people a free download, in exchange. Facebook have a thing called a lead ad, which is very simple. And so it actually kind of does everything for you. You get their name and email, and it makes it very easy because Facebook know that already. So you don't even have to type it in on a phone. So it's more like, the form pops up in a lead ad and it says Rob and my email address, and you just tap yep. And then, so it's very easy to do. So, as a low cost way to explore the market, once you've done all that research, come up with an opt-in gift, a free download, a freebie, a lead magnet, whatever you want to call it. Also, you can refer to that in your Instagrams, depending on what your audience is, Instagrams and TikToks, say, go to this, domain and get my free download on such and such. So, and then you'll find out which things you say on those videos actually get, because you get high watches, but you don't get necessarily currently high following, permanent followers on your platform, right? So,
no, zero.
Right. So, yeah. So the algorithm is putting it in front of people, but the next challenge is to convert it, right? So people are seeing the video, but they're not necessarily liking the video or following you. So, you do want to ask them to like and follow. We talked about that, and I think we're probably doing that. And then you want to have what you want is a really simple domain, because your domain based on your name is a very important one for you to keep. But your surname is not as easy to spell as Smith. So when you're giving a domain on a video, it has to be really simple.
Yes, good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
So so it can be a made up name, could be anything, but it has to be something short and super memorable so people can actually do it. Then and there.
I'm going to do some research on that as well.
Yeah.
So
but
in
the
closing,
first step, as we said, is to actually get people to follow, because if they follow you on Instagram or whatever, then you can put an ad, through Facebook to Instagram to people who follow you, and then you can make that proposition so that the link is there for them to tap. So the most important first step, right, one step at a time, ask them to do one thing is like and follow is two things, but like is a tap and follow is, so you want, hey, if you like this, like and follow, and you'll see more of this.
I just started doing that in my last, and I have a new video I'm doing when I'm away this weekend, and I'm gonna read that book that you recommended. I can't wait to do that. Got it from my beach reading or audible listening. I probably listened to it in the car, and I listened to 1.5 times speed. I think you said it was like a 3.5 hour book. I'll probably be done with it before I leave Arizona.
Was that the book I told you about a few days ago, do you mean?
Yeah, the one you told me about which I downloaded on Audible, and I can't wait to listen to.
That's that 100 million thing.
Yeah. Which I'm going to do, and I'm focusing on this weekend. I'm setting some time aside. So just in closing here, as we wrap this out, and then I'll follow up with WhatsApp with you on a few things. But this is what I came up with, and I kind of love it. Like, as a child, curiosity of the experience creates the enjoyment overall, and as an adult, the money used to purchase the experience limits the enjoyment. That's right. That's what we've done. To your point, you're like,
yep.
Oh, holy cow. Now I'm going to define the pain points, go through all these different things, list them out, and try to say, okay, what is that? How does that build that foundation for me?
Yeah. The pain points are really important, as you know, and front door needs and then back door needs. Like, scribble down everything that comes to mind. Like, initially we're looking for the front door needs, and then you and I know how to unpack that syndrome to actually get to the back door needs. What are the true causes and solutions around their problems, their pain?
Yeah. I'm excited by this. This is great. Thanks for, this was really inspirational today. I just took about 10 pages of notes. So
Good.
Thank you.
Good.
For that. I'm going to apply this into the coursework that we're doing with you, and we're going to get this stuff moving. I like it. I'm feeling